Hey friends, are you done with dating apps? Tired of swiping through profiles and superficial chats that go nowhere? Well, swipe left on those boring rituals. Introducing Done with Dating, the free podcast-driven dating platform that's bringing human interaction back. We sit down with incredible singles for real conversations on our weekly podcast. Listeners like you get to know them deeply, then apply to date guests or step into the mic yourself. Plus, we host experts that discuss the dating world and provide advice on self-improvement techniques when you are taking a break from dating or focusing on yourself. Made for the bold, built for connection. Your dating journey redefined through the mic. Head to donewithdating.co right now and apply. It's all free. Your perfect match is one episode away. Hey friends, the next 2 episodes are about parenthood. This episode is a conversation about young men and lessons learned from my life and that of my guest, Stephen. The next episode will be a discussion on motherhood with a mother of 3 and sexual intimacy expert, Caroline. I'm placing them together so that there is parity in the discussion for both male and female audience members. I hope you enjoy them. Here we go. Hi, everybody. Today joining me is Stephen Goodwin from Full Disclosure Conversations. I wanted to bring him on and have a conversation with him, dealing with trauma, dealing with loss, dealing with all types of things that men go through when they're married, when they're single, when they're in relationships. So, Stephen, thanks very much for coming on.
Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Well, thanks very much. So could you just tell us a little bit about what inspired you to create Full Disclosure Conversations and what type of community you're trying to build with it?
It's a good question. It's also a loaded question. When I originally started Full Disclosure Conversations, it started on Facebook Live, and it was simply with friends and family members because I believed that everyone had a story to tell, but they weren't going to be able to have the chance to share it on Joe Rogan or Chris Williamson or Mel Robbins or Stephen Barrett. And so I wanted to give a space for people to share what they had gone through. It evolved as time went on. I became more familiar with Instagram. I started reaching out to individuals on Instagram to have conversations. Honestly, I don't think I really realized what I was trying to do when I started this. I didn't have a clue what I was doing. I didn't know how to reach out to people. I didn't know who was going to say yes, who was going to say no. And it sort of evolved. And as it evolved, I was dating someone at the time, and we were preparing to get engaged and ultimately married. And I wanted to be the best husband and father figure that I could be. And so I started having conversations with a lot of men and talking all things marriage, talking all things relationships, talking all things parenting. Um, and that was where it sort of evolved. But as her and I got married, I started realizing that there were things inside of me that still needed to be healed. There were still things inside of me that I needed to mature, I needed to grow. And that shifted who I was having conversations with. I started getting connected with people globally. And to make a really long story short, that marriage ultimately ended. That marriage ended for various reasons. But when that marriage ended, all of a sudden, the floodgates opened, and I started being able to have conversations with both men and women. Ultimately, what I'm trying to do is I am trying to marry stories with education in order to inspire healing. So, on the one hand, I want to present people stories so other people that are going through it, they can identify with it and relate. But on the other hand, I want to provide the education. So you may have experienced these stories, you may have gone through the experiences, but now let me connect you with some professionals, people that I've talked with, therapists, coaches, counselors, doctors, attorneys, whatever it may be, and present you with ways of identifying what you're going through in your story, but also understand how to come out of it. And at the end of the day, if I could summarize it, it's basically creating a community where people feel seen and heard.
That's great. And I think a lot of people learn best from stories, and people who have a great storytelling capability can really share more and make things way more valuable for people. When was it that you got divorced? Was it recent?
Yeah, it was a couple months ago, so it's still very fresh. Interestingly enough, this was my second marriage and second divorce. So, the first marriage I could speak to all day long, every day, and that's a little easier to digest and that's a little easier to talk about. Second one almost derailed me and almost wrecked me. And interestingly enough, the conversations that I have are one of the things that I don't want to say they didn't save my life per se, but they kept me from spiraling and they helped keep me grounded and they helped educate me on how to process what I was going through.
You need the community to help you when you're going through it. My divorce was official about 5 years ago. I had some friends who were really tied into the group. And so I
Mhm.
lost some friends. I had some friends that tell me, like, hey, it's too busy right now. Sorry. But then I had other friends who I consider now my pack. They stayed with me
Right,
the whole time. They always
right.
checked in. Um,
Hmm.
it- but as a guy, I mean, honestly, there's only one or two of those really good friends that I actually shared my emotions with. A lot of the
Hmm.
others were very transactional or, best friends, great friends, but I just didn't have that. Um, we just never shared emotion. And so what I've learned in doing podcasting, it's only been about almost 3 months now, but I've learned to expand my horizons so much by talking to different people and learning about elements of their lives, like you talked about with storytelling. So maybe some anecdotes that they shared that have really helped me to grow in just even the last 3 months. And there's a lot that we can learn from each other, just like you said, in terms of the community and podcasting helping us to grow in a really powerful
Hmm.
way.
Hmm.
But you're still kind of in the middle of it, right? You're still going through it, and you're still dealing with a lot of the raw, probably emotion from that. One of the things that I saw was you talked about sharing the gap between the smiling photos and the hidden pain, right?
Hmm.
And can you give us an example of maybe something that's not as close to recent or whatever you want to share that would give that example? And I can give you some of my anecdotes as well.
Yeah, I think what I will say before I say anything else is that Instagram, like TikTok, like Facebook, tends to place more value on the highlight reels than they do on what I would call the trauma reels or the pain reels or the hurt reels. And a lot of people gravitate towards that. A lot of people would prefer that. They would prefer the things that make them happy. They would prefer the things that may bring them joy. They like a good success story. There was even a Christian dating group that I was on where I met my ex on, and they called it a success story. And it was we met in the group, we dated, we got engaged, we got married. They show their pictures, and on the surface, it seems wonderful. On the surface, it seems great. But I have learned that no matter what I see on social media, it is not always the full picture. And even my own story, I posted pictures of my ex wife and I on my Facebook. I tagged her in those, and my profile picture was a picture from me at the wedding. And people saw that picture when it was posted, and everyone said, "You look so happy. You look so happy." Even after the separation and the divorce, I sent pictures to someone else, and she looked at the pictures and she said, "You look so happy." And the interesting thing about it is, in the moment, I was happy. In the moment, I was grateful for the relationship. In the moment, I was feeling joyful. I was feeling all of those jitters and butterflies and everything that you would associate with hopefully finding the person that you were going to love and they were going to love you for the rest of your lives. And it's good until it isn't, and that was my story. It was good until it wasn't. And the good moments were very few and far between, and they were outweighed by so many other painful moments, moments of emotional trauma, moments of mental trauma, moments of verbal trauma, so many different scenarios that happen behind the scenes that you go out and you present a smile, you pretend, you learn how to be fake. And social media is one of the greatest platforms to pretend on.
I think that's a very common theme. I would call it like the Facebook family. It's all fake,
Yeah.
and you can literally go from that smiling, and that there's anecdotes where these people were fighting to
Mhm.
get the kids into the photo, screaming at them like, "Take the photo!" Like
Mhm.
I used
Yeah.
to do that with Christmas cards. The Christmas card fight was a massive fight to get the kids in
Mhm.
front of a camera for Christmas cards. It was killer, and
Mhm.
so I don't do Christmas cards anymore, but that was always like, you'd see these really nice smiles, and it was usually heavy bribery, where it's like,
Yeah.
okay,
Yep.
we'll get candy or we'll do something like that. I just need one good photo from you out of like 100.
Right.
All of you have to be looking at the camera and smiling. But yeah, there's a lot of that, and I think that especially with men, I feel like it's a lot harder to have the hard conversations. And I wish that I was able to do that when I was younger. And I'm 50 now, and I've learned a lot, through suffering and through trials and tribulations of life. And so, in terms of a story that I had similar to that, I'm gonna really use more of a professional story in terms of a work related story. But I was leaving the FBI. I was retiring, quote unquote retiring. I don't collect a pension, but I might if it still exists when I'm 60. But I was leaving as a non-agent in the FBI and really trying to find my next stop. And I was really worried about the transition. I was nervous about not making the wrong decision and trying to find fit. And a lot of what I was going through, the struggles I had day in and day out were like the interview processes. I was making it to like second and third interviews in 2020, 2021. I would make it to the final interview. I'd be like the top two. And then they'd be like, sorry, we went a different direction. And it was just crushing and it was nonstop. But,
Mhm.
at work and in my personal life, I had to put on a good face. I tried to remain confident and things like that, but it was really hard. And eventually I did make that breakthrough and find a place that not only did I want to go to and really was hoping to get the job, but they wanted me too. So it ended up
Mhm.
working out the way that it was meant to be. But again, it's like a lot of that is you don't know what's happening between the eyes and the brain, is what's
Yeah.
going on in someone's head.
Mhm.
If you could have like a hard, tough session with a younger version of yourself, what would you tell him about really creating his own identity, being comfortable with that, and healing and just being humble?
Mhm. I spent my whole life people pleasing. I spent my whole life performing. I spent my whole life chasing affirmation and applause and accolades and attention. And as a result, it made me susceptible to labels. It made me susceptible to other people's opinions and criticisms and judgments and limiting beliefs. And as a result of that, it brought me to the place where I allowed myself to shrink. And I would shrink it to fit environments that I was perhaps never supposed to be in. I shrank in relationships that I perhaps not only was never supposed to be in, but truthfully didn't have the space or the capacity to actually handle it. To your point about humility, not because I'm anything great, not because I have an elevated or lofty opinion of myself. I consider myself to be very much a work in progress. Someone asked me before I made the decision to sort of torpedo my life back in February. And the question that they asked is, what would your life look like if you truly began to understand your worth and your value and you began operating with that? And it was a question that really hit me. And then they went on to ask, what would it look like if you truly began to understand your identity and you started walking in it? I just turned 43 and I look back on my first marriage and I tell people that I got married too young for all the wrong reasons and before I knew who I truly was, to touch on that identity piece. If I could go back in time. Now, here's the thing that is interesting about that. This is the caveat. I don't know if my younger version would have listened because I was very stubborn, very
Mhm.
hard hearted, very thick headed. And so I can't say that I would have listened. I can't say that the outcome would have changed because I know who I was back then. But if there's one thing that I could say, if there's one thing that I encourage, it's Discover who you are. Don't allow anyone else to dictate or determine who you become. Don't allow other people's labels or limitations to define you. Don't allow yourself to be paralyzed or crippled by other people's critiques and criticisms, because they're a dime a dozen. People are always going to have opinions about you. People are always going to judge you. People are always going to look down on you. People are always going to have something to say. And I would encourage him to not shrink himself to fit into the mold that someone else places on him, to not shrink himself to fit someone else's expectations, to not shrink himself to fit rooms that perhaps didn't have the space to hold who you were. The biggest thing that I would probably say to him is this: the most powerful man in the room is not the one with the most charisma. It's not the one with the strongest personality. It's not the one that's the loudest or the most boisterous. It's not the one that comes in dressed in a fancy three-piece suit with the Rolex and a, a beautiful woman on his arm. The most powerful woman, or the most powerful man and woman, I should say, in the room is that one that knows who they are, is that one who knows their identity, is that one who knows their value and their worth. And I would also add that one that has the calmest heart rate, the one that is at peace with themselves, the one that has a balanced equilibrium, the one that truly understands the concept of homeostasis, where you can really regulate your nervous system, you can regulate your thoughts, you can regulate your emotions, and you can really understand the importance of being grounded and centered and honestly walking in that.
That's great. I would give the same advice. I was a people pleaser. I lived in the paradigms that other people set for me, and it was not a healthy place for me. And I had to learn to adopt. And now I'm a type of person where, especially in dating, when I'm in a relationship now with someone, and by the time I met her, I was like, this is who I am.
Mhm.
You don't have to like it, but you have to accept it if you want to be with me. And she had kind of reached that point for herself as well in her own world. And
Mhm.
so we have a really good, nice, balanced relationship. And it's only because I have standards now that I'd never had enforced before in a lot of places. And part of that I think is the culture, not necessarily that we were growing up and like I was an Xer. I think you're probably like an elder millennial, right? But we
Mhm.
were generally in the same spaces. But there started to be a real attack on masculinity probably in the 2000s. And I think that a big part of masculinity is, like you said, you don't have to be the loudest in the room. You don't even need to be
Mhm.
the most deadly in the room. You just need to know like your space in the room and how you fit in the
Mhm.
room. And so I've learned that the hard way, a lot of different lessons along the way. Um,
Mhm.
but now I feel like with enforcing standards of who I am and keeping true to my identity, my life is so much easier because I just say
Mhm.
no. I say no sometimes, and it's there's sometimes where if it's not a major struggle against like my standards, I'll be like, yeah, let me help with this or do that. But I've found that I say no now more often to events or interactions with people. And I do that specifically when I don't think that they're going to be a positive influence on my life, my experience. Sometimes I do things to help others, of course, but generally, if it's not something where someone's in dire need or something going on, like, and I just don't want to do it, I just don't do it. I just say, no,
Mhm.
I'm all set. I'm not going. And I've actually eliminated a lot of people who I would consider toxic in my life that
Mhm.
really just took and never gave. And even if I was giving, I just felt like there was never that reciprocality of the
Yeah.
relationship. Have you experienced kind of the same thing? And why do you think it's so important for boundaries or standards to be upheld by men
Mm.
in lieu of their or in terms of their identity?
A lot of people think that boundaries are unnecessary. A lot of people have a skewed idea or understanding of what they actually are. And there's a difference between knowing what your boundaries are and enforcing what your boundaries are. And I think for the longest time, I didn't know what my boundaries were. I think I operated without them. I said no when I should have said yes. I said yes when I should have said no. And I didn't know how to enforce it. I didn't know what to do. It was very much a novice, very much a rookie. And one of the things that someone said to me, that a boundary is simply an invitation for someone else to love you the way that you deserve to be loved. And I think that that is an accurate description. It's not only an invitation for someone else to love us the way that we need to be loved, but I also think it's an invitation to us to be able to love them. I think when you operate without boundaries, I think you operate out of alignment, right? If you're driving a car that's out of alignment, you're either going to find yourself in a horrific accident on the freeway, or you're going to find yourself in the ditch on the side of the road because you didn't take the time. And I feel like boundaries allow you to come into alignment with yourself. And I would say that boundaries, if they don't equal alignment with yourself, they contribute to it, and they allow you. I think boundaries are probably one of the truest expressions of yourself because they show what you value. They show what you will and what you won't tolerate. And for the longest time, I think I tolerated just about anything. And even in my most recent relationship, I said everything was good until it wasn't, but I would say everything was good until I developed a voice. Everything was good until I started enforcing my boundaries. And when I started understanding what my boundaries were, when I started to enforce them, that is when, quote unquote, all hell broke loose. And I think that boundaries are an extension and an expression of our identity. You have to know who you are, to your point. You have to know who you are in order to understand your boundaries. And what I'm still trying to figure out is what comes first. Does your identity come first, or do the boundaries come first, or do they come at the same time? I really don't know because it's something that I'm still working through in real time, but I can say the two are very much linked. And the person who doesn't know who they are is a person who is very well going to live without an understanding of boundaries and without being able to enforce them. And that particular person is going to be just like me, where if you don't learn who you are, life is going to bring you face to face through circumstances and events where you're going to have to learn who you are. And you may have to learn it at a much quicker pace, but also boundaries. If you don't learn what your boundaries are, if you don't learn how to enforce them, all you're doing is inviting disaster. All you're doing is inviting catastrophe and collateral damage and chaos. And I know firsthand what that was like. I had a conversation with someone, and they said that boundaries is probably the most selfless and sacrificial thing that you can do, not for the other person, but for yourself, because it's the ultimate expression of kindness towards yourself. It's the ultimate expression of self love. And when you know what they are and you can enforce them, what you're doing is you're actually showing and communicating to the other person that you love yourself, that you're being kind to yourself, that you're respecting yourself. And not everybody can handle that. Not everybody can handle an expressed boundary. Not everybody can handle an enforced boundary. And more often than not, how someone handles a boundary is going to reveal the the health of the relationship. And I'm convinced relationships can be made or broken simply on the conversation of boundaries.
Definitely. And you raised a really powerful point about not knowing necessarily which comes first. I would argue from my experience that regardless of your age, your personality starts to form when you're younger. So,
Yeah.
like in my case, integrity was always important to me. And in the military, integrity, service before self, excellence in all we do. Those were the core values of the Air Force. Then I went to
Yeah.
the FBI. It's fidelity, bravery, integrity, right? Like adherence
Mhm.
to the Constitution, being maintaining integrity with what you do in your investigations. But
Mm,
other elements of my boundaries have changed over time as I've learned and become wiser. But I think for young men, certainly there's certain things that they can hold to pretty early on. And I see that with some of my children in terms of they have boundaries. You know, they're good to other people. They don't like preach Christian values, but they live a Christian life and they are
mm,
chivalrous with people. My daughter is just as chivalrous as my boys with
mm,
yeah, holding the door for people, doing nice deeds for each other, sticking up for
mm,
people. I'd say my
mm,
daughter is the fiercest of anybody sticking up for friends
mm.
or people that aren't even her friends, you know, but
Yeah.
they're my sons will do the same thing. My oldest son specifically will stick up for others. And so I think there's certainly as those formative years happen, they may not realize it, but they have boundaries. And people, maybe younger people listening, if they hear this from two older generations, maybe they'll say, like, maybe they'll just do some introspection and say, yeah, these are my standards, these are my values, these are my boundaries,
Mm,
and I don't want to break those. And even
mm,
for younger kids, like drugs, not doing drugs, not doing alcohol, those are easy boundaries that could be set because it's
mm,
very binary, right? You're either not going to participate or you're going to be persuaded into participating. So for younger
mm.
kids, it's one of those things where those are easy to enforce in terms of a binary yes or no. It's
Yeah.
harder amongst peer pressure and things, of course,
Right.
but um, would you agree on that, or do you think there's other stuff to think about as well with that idea?
No, I think to your point, one of the things that you said was it begins with childhood. It begins when you were a child and you talked about your own kids and you talked about them learning what it's like to be chivalrous was the example that you gave. I think that it's something that honestly we're all called to do, and I think that I will have to say this, that I commend and I applaud any parents, whether they're married or whether they're a single parent, who can raise kids that know how to be kind, that know how to be chivalrous, that know how to be polite, that know how to value others, that know how to stick up for each other. Because honestly, I think that that would save a lot of heartache, that would save a lot of chaos and debris and wreckage and carnage later on in life, especially in relationships. Let me give you an example. I was with my then girlfriend at the time, and we went out to a nice restaurant in Charlotte. And the father brought his teenage daughter out, and it was clearly a daddy daughter date, which we both were amazed by. But he taught her what the different silverware was, the little fork and the little spoon and the fork. He pulled the chair
Hmm.
out for her when she was sitting down. He allowed her to order first. He asked her questions. He was curious. He he went above and beyond what I have ever seen a father do for a daughter. But what he was doing was he was teaching her what to look for and what to expect in a man, because whether we want to admit it or not, I am not a parent, but whether we want to admit it or not, more is caught than is taught. And they are watching even when we think they're not watching. They are listening even when we think they're not listening. And so they will grow up most likely desiring someone that is just like you. If it's your daughter, they potentially will grow up and pursue a man that is just like you. If it's a son, they may grow up and be a man just like you, and vice versa if you flip the script. So honestly, to your point, I think it all begins in childhood. I think it all begins with the example. And it honestly, I think it also has to do with having those hard conversations, having those difficult conversations, as you mentioned with your boys, having that difficult conversation with your daughter, and helping them to understand what this stuff is. Because truthfully, I don't know if you would agree with this, but truthfully, I don't think our educational system and the schools are teaching this. I don't think the schools and the educational systems are teaching students, whether they're elementary, whether they're junior high, whether they're high school, how to process all of this, which means that they are either going to learn it in the home or they're going to learn it in the world. They're going to learn it by watching it and observing it, or they're going to learn it by experience. And unfortunately, more men and more women are learning from experience because they weren't taught in the home. And I think that that's where there's a serious disconnect. So I think that's where we really need to understand the responsibility that we have, so that way they do grow up and they do know what to look for, and not only even what to look for, but what they themselves need to look and act and be.
It's a really great point, and I see it a lot in younger kids right now where I think you're right in terms of the schools have become almost an area where parents send their kids to school as a form of daycare, you know, and
Yeah.
then they get home
Hmm.
and I mean, I will say I was really busy as a dad when my kids were
Hmm.
younger. I coached a lot of sports. I did a lot of the things that a dad should do. It was like, you know, but it was kind of like the Facebook family type stuff. And I was at
Yeah.
times really just hurting inside. But what I learned was that I could have done more, but I feel like generally, um, we both, the kid's mom and I both raised the kids at home, and we
Hmm.
did a lot of work with the teachers to make sure that the standards were enforced at home
Yeah.
and at school. And in terms of the education system, I think there's a lot of distractions now, you know,
Hmm.
with the education system, particularly because there's not an allowance for discipline like there used to be. I mean, I'm
Hmm.
not saying we should go back to my my high school days where like literally I watched some people get punched by a teacher.
Hmm.
So I wouldn't say
Hmm.
that. I'm not saying that and advocating for that, but there should be some level of discipline where if you get thrown out of your class because you were acting up, I would have been petrified to go home. There were a couple times I got into fights in high school and I would cry after the fight was over, not because
Hmm.
of how the fight ended, but because I was scared to death to tell my father that I got into a
Hmm.
fight at school, you know,
Right.
and it was coming down off the fight or flight, but it was also like, oh God, like, what am I going to do now? I'm screwed when I get
Hmm.
home. And,
Hmm.
and part of that was there were consequences. And I don't know in how many households, like you said, there's those actual consequences now. So it's kind of like raising people in the village square, like you were talking about. They're learning in society as opposed to learning at home or learning at school, or the nice hybrid combination of both, which can
Yeah.
be really powerful if somebody has the supports at home and somebody has the supports at school. And some teachers are really incredible, and other ones just do their job because they're burned out because they've been stuck with this for so long, where the parents are not supportive. So it's a
Right.
really challenging educational system right now, really challenging environment. I would say I think
Hmm.
there's tons of great teachers out there, but it's really up to the parents to enforce the rules. Because
Hmm.
if a teacher sends a note home, the teacher probably put a lot of thought into that note, how it would be received, what
Hmm.
the temperature maybe of the note would be, what the intensity of the note would be, and for them not to get a response from a parent, it's disrespectful to the teacher, disrespectful to the
Hmm.
system, and really disrespectful to the child because they need to have boundaries and discipline.
Hmm.
So yeah, you definitely hit on a good point there. And so hopefully like
Hmm.
podcasts like yours, maybe episodes of podcasts like mine, if you have people listen to this, they can try to take those lessons and say, okay, you know, where are we? Where do we fit into this?
Hmm.
So this has been a really good conversation for people who want to start their own full disclosure conversations. You know, what
Hmm.
is your advice to them? And the second part of that is wrapping this up. Like, where can they find you? What is the best places for them to find you?
So I'll answer the second question first. You can find
Sure.
me on Instagram. It's Full Disclosure Conversations. without any spaces, without any punctuation, simply full disclosure conversations. That is the primary platform that I use. You can follow me on Facebook just by searching my name, and a lot of the content that I post on Instagram cross post to my Facebook as well. Um, to answer your question on what advice I would give someone that would want to start this, it goes back to curiosity. It goes back to being a student. If you're looking to start this, I would understand what your purpose is. My purpose has evolved over the course of a year, and it has really changed in terms of trajectory and scope over the last 3 months. So recognize what it is that you want to do, take what you want to do, and in all reality, this may sound controversial or this may sound counterintuitive. I'd say throw it out the window, throw it in the trash. Because I guarantee you, the more you do it, the more it's going to evolve. And the picture is going to look drastically different from what you thought it was going to look like when you first started. When I first started, I thought this was going to go in one direction. And where I'm at right now is a completely different direction. Where I am a year from now, 5 years from now, it may be in a whole other direction. So I would say take whatever goal you have, take whatever purpose you have, take whatever mission you have, pursue it, but hold it very loosely, because the more you do this, the more conversations you have, the more you're going to learn about yourself. And the more you learn about yourself, the more you're going to realize, okay, as the platform grows, I'm growing. As the platform evolves, I'm evolving. And both are kind of interconnected. And it's like both are growing simultaneously with each other. And the trajectory is not one and the same, but they're moving at the same speed. And sometimes the platform can outpace who you are. Sometimes who you are can outpace the platform. And it's being able to handle that either tension between the distance, or recognizing when they're actually operating in sync with each other. And here's the other thing that I would say. This is perhaps one of the biggest pieces of advice I could give. Don't be afraid to reach out to anybody and everybody. I don't care if they have 500,000 followers. I don't care if they have a million followers. I've had conversations with three different individuals. One has 250,000 followers. Another one has over 600,000 followers. Another one has 500,000 followers. All three of them said yes. So don't be afraid to reach out and send the message. Shoot your shot, because you never know. But also, with that being said, get very comfortable and develop thick skin when no one responds to you, because it's going to happen. The margin of success from who responds to me and who I actually talk with versus the amount of people that I reach out to, there is a serious gap between those numbers. And it's being able to understand that you attract and you don't chase. While you're sending messages to people, understand that the right people will find you, the right conversations will take place. All you have to do is make sure that at the very heart of it all, you stay true to yourself.
Incredible advice. Stephen, this has been awesome. I really appreciate the conversation and the reality of that conversation too. So where can people reach out and talk to you or listen to you?
So they can listen to clips from the conversations on Instagram. You can go to YouTube, and my YouTube is still introductory, so it's still in its infant stage. So it is full disclosure conversations on YouTube. I'm also on Spotify. Spotify is a slow work in progress, so you can find me using that handle on all three of those platforms. And then the only other thing that I would say is I am only a DM away. So if anything from this conversation resonates with you and you want to reach out, you can reach out. If you go to my page and anything there resonates, you can reach out as well.
Awesome. Well, I really appreciate your time in this incredible conversation.
I appreciate it.
So
Thanks for
thanks
having
very
me.
much.
Absolutely.
So if you're done with endless swiping and ready for something real, don't miss a single episode. Hit that subscribe button right now on your favorite podcast app and never miss the bold conversations that could change your dating life forever. Every week, we bring you incredible singles, excellent advice, raw stories, and real opportunities to connect, all for free. Subscribe today, apply at donewithdating.co, and turn your next listen into your next date. Your perfect match is waiting on the other side of the mic. It doesn't matter where you live, someone local is listening and will want to date you. We'll see you in the next episode. Subscribe now.